Okay, tonight, we're stepping into the silence of an old wound that never healed. An unsolved mystery lingers in the salty air of Australia's coast, where laughter once mixed with the restless tide. The story of two young girls who never came back from a walk on the sand still haunts a nation. This is not a tale of gore or spectacle. It is a story of absence, of questions that echo louder than answers, and of a dark past carved into a bright summer day. Welcome to Criminal Mindcast, the podcast where we tell true crime stories not just with facts, but with silence, with the haunting weight of what was never said. Here, we do not chase shock. We listen to the spaces between details, the voids in the record, the chilling pauses that linger long after the headlines fade. We seek the human shadows left behind. Tonight's story is the Wanda Beach murders of 1965. A cold case that remains unsolved after decades. Two girls, a nation's fear, and a mystery that refuses to rest.
That could strike without warning. They were not famous, not controversial. They were simply teenage girls searching for belonging, freedom and small joys within the shifting sands of adolescence. Marianne Schmidt was born in Germany and brought to Australia by her family seeking renewal after the devastation of war. At 15, she was tall, reserved, and carried the unspoken burden of immigrant identity. Much of her home life revolved around responsibility, caring for younger siblings in a household marked by quiet resilience. Christine Sharrock, also 15, was Australian-born but carried her own fractures. Her parents had separated, leaving her navigating divided homes and searching for stability. The two girls found solace in each other. Their friendship became more than companionship. It was a refuge, a lifeline that shielded them from the loneliness of adolescence. Psychologists note that for many teenagers, friendship replaces family as the primary source of validation. For Marianne and Christine, shared laughter disguised their fragility, while their bond became a sanctuary in a world shadowed by unspoken struggles, migration, separation, and the weight of silent scars. When family systems experience rupture, teenagers often search outward for stability. According to trauma psychology, unresolved family stress increases risk-taking behaviors. A beach trip may appear harmless, but for two girls craving independence, it was also an escape from household tension. Wanda Beach became more than sand and sea. It became temporary freedom. The environment of 1960s Sydney was a paradox. Australia projected images of sunlit beaches and carefree leisure, yet beneath it there were anxieties of migration, cultural change, and social repression. For girls, freedom was never without risk. Each step away from the family home was also a step closer to danger, unacknowledged by society. Small towns, even suburban communities, carry their own secrets. Within them, whispers of family dysfunction, hidden violence, and unspoken traumas are often silenced beneath appearances. In this context, the archetype of a small-town murder does not only describe geography. It describes the pressure cooker of repressed tension where violence eventually erupts. The psychological profile of potential predators who haunt such spaces is chillingly consistent. They are often men who feel unseen, emasculated, or powerless, seeking control over the vulnerable. They drift in public spaces, observing, waiting, blending into the ordinary background until opportunity collides with obsession. Someone like that was watching Marianne and Christine. The girls were described as cheerful that day, laughing, carrying food, and moving through the crowd with carefree energy. They were innocent in the most fragile sense, believing the beach to be a safe stage for adolescent exploration. Yet innocence is precisely what attracts the gaze of those with predatory psychology. In retrospect, their vulnerability was not in their actions, but in their visibility. They were together, yet alone. They were young, yet unsupervised. They were joyful, yet fragile. This triad of visibility, independence, and fragility forms the exact constellation that a predator exploits. The psychological pattern is almost mathematical in its inevitability. Understanding the background of Marianne and Christine means acknowledging how societal forces shaped their fates. Their families' fractures left them searching for freedom. The culture of 1960s Australia underestimated the risks the predator's psychology was ready to exploit. Together, these conditions formed a fatal convergence that was more than coincidence. Family secrets linger like ghosts. Marianne's household carried silence about the hardships of migration. Christine's family carried silence about divorce and separation. Silence itself becomes part of the psychological atmosphere, teaching children that vulnerability must be hidden. When hidden, it becomes unprotected, and predators sense that unspoken weakness like a scent. Psychologists suggest that adolescent girls with disrupted family structures may unconsciously seek danger as a way of testing boundaries and constructing identity. This does not blame the victims. Instead, it explains how developmental psychology intersects with risk. A trip to the beach was an ordinary act that intersected tragically with unseen psychological predators. The concept of freedom is also worth reflecting upon philosophically. In Stoic thought, freedom is not external but internal, independent of circumstances. Yet for two girls in 1965, freedom was externalized: a day at the beach, laughter with a friend, walking away from parental oversight. It was pure, fragile, and fleeting. Their short lives remind us that innocence is not a shield. In fact, innocence often exposes because it does not anticipate harm. In Buddhist thought, suffering arises when reality contradicts expectation. The expectation of safety on a summer beach collided with the reality of malevolence. Suffering was born from that rupture. Marianne and Christine never expected danger because society had not prepared them for it. Public warnings about predators were rare. Law enforcement of the time lacked preventative education. The cultural narrative painted beaches as carefree paradises. Within that narrative, predators could walk invisibly, camouflaged by the very myth of safety. If we attempt to construct a psychological profile of the eventual killer, we see a figure who thrived on cultural blindness. Predators flourish in environments where innocence is unable to imagine their presence. The person who murdered Marianne and Christine likely understood that the beach symbolized freedom for children, and within that very freedom lay opportunity for violence. The tragedy of Marianne and Christine does not begin at the moment of their deaths. It begins earlier, within the fractures of their lives. A divided family, a household marked by migration, the longing for belonging, and the cultural myth that small communities are safe. Each factor added another fragile layer until vulnerability became complete. The predator did not create these vulnerabilities. He merely recognized and exploited them. We must remember that behind the brutality were lives once filled with laughter and quiet dreams. Marianne may have wished for a future with less responsibility. Christine may have longed for her family to be whole again. These silent hopes were extinguished by a stranger's cruelty. Their story reveals that the greatest danger sometimes hides in the illusion of safety itself. The morning of January 11, 1965, began like any other summer day in Sydney. Wanda Beach shimmered with sunlight, laughter, and surf. Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock set out with towels and snacks, eager to escape their homes for a few hours of freedom. Ordinary girls on an ordinary day, they carried with them the restless energy of adolescence. Their journey took them by train toward Cronulla, the station closest to Wanda. Fellow passengers later remembered two cheerful girls moving quickly through the crowd. Unremarkable at the time, unforgettable in retrospect. That train ride was the last moment their innocence remained intact. At the beach, they blended easily into the holiday crowd. Families gathered under umbrellas. Children splashed near the surf. Teenagers clustered in groups. Witnesses later described Marianne and Christine walking together, laughing, carefree. Yet even in crowded spaces, isolation can emerge. As the day unfolded, the girls drifted north toward quieter dunes, moving away from watchful eyes and into a liminal zone between safety and solitude. It was there, in that shifting border between beach and wilderness, that their vulnerability became most acute. Crowds protect, but seclusion, whether chosen or accidental, creates opportunity for those who seek harm. The reconstructed timeline suggests the girls were last seen alive in early afternoon, near the northern dunes, speaking with a young man, tall, slim, fair-haired. He seemed ordinary, even forgettable. Yet predators often present as just that, safe, unremarkable, camouflaged by normalcy. Police sketches later tried to fix his face, but eyewitness memory is fragile. What endures is the unsettling image of a stranger's casual presence turning deadly. From that point, silence descends. No witnesses heard screams. No one saw the struggle. The dunes, shaped by wind and grass, insulated sound. Within that hush, conversation became violence. By the time their bodies were found, horror had already passed into history. The discovery came the next day, when a boy stumbled upon the partially buried bodies. Marianne's throat was slashed. Christine bore multiple stab wounds. Their attacker had attempted to conceal them with sand, but hurriedly, incompletely. The scene carried both rage and panic, violence mixed with disorder. Forensic investigation revealed a struggle. Footprints cut through the sand, grass lay trampled, belongings were scattered. Food and money were untouched, confirming robbery was not the motive. This was violence for its own sake. Personal in intensity, impersonal in victim choice. The brutality suggested compulsion, humiliation, and domination rather than simple opportunism. Though evidence hinted at sexual overtones, investigators could not confirm assault. Still, the disarray of clothing and body positioning suggested degradation was central. In many such crimes, control matters more than possession. Power matters more than gain. The likely window of death spanned only a few hours between the girls' last sighting and the moment silence swallowed them. Around them, hundreds of beachgoers enjoyed the day, oblivious to the brutality unfolding only meters away. This juxtaposition, joy and horror sharing the same space, became one of the case's most haunting features. Witnesses later complicated the timeline. Some claimed they saw a man running through the dunes, glancing behind him. Others remembered someone pacing, agitated, carrying a long object. Still others noticed nothing at all. Eyewitness testimony, shaped by fear and hindsight, provided fragments but no certainty. Police traced footprints leading to and from the scene, zigzagging in patterns that suggested confusion or injury. Some speculated the killer may have been wounded during the struggle. Others suspected contamination from ordinary beachgoers. The science of the 1960s could not resolve such questions. DNA testing was decades away. Blood typing and fingerprint recovery from sand were unreliable. What remained were only visible impressions: wounds, positions, footprints, and silence. By nightfall on the 11th, Marianne and Christine had vanished from their families' lives. Their absence went unnoticed by the wider world until morning, when discovery shattered the illusion of safety. For the families, the silence of waiting became unbearable. For the nation, the images printed in newspapers marked the end of an era of innocence. In criminal psychology, the space between last seen alive and found dead is the abyss where certainty collapses. That abyss remains in the Wanda Beach case. The killer's identity has never been named. Memory faded, evidence decayed. Silence swallowed truth. Decades later, forensic hope briefly flickered when partial DNA traces were recovered from clothing. Yet degradation left the profiles incomplete, frustrating investigators. Modern technology offered fragments, not closure. The killer remained faceless. Meanwhile, witness fragments hardened into myth. Some swore they saw the fair-haired man. Others imagined suspicious figures pacing near the dunes. None aligned perfectly, leaving only contradictions. Memory proved as unreliable as sand in the wind. What remains clear is the symbolic power of the crime scene itself, a sunlit beach masking hidden brutality. The girls' laughter, echoing only hours before, became unbearably poignant when contrasted with their silenced bodies. The ordinary environment, holiday crowds, surf, sunshine, collided with extraordinary violence. The Wanda Beach timeline reminds us how quickly normalcy fractures. A train ride, a beach walk, a smile at a stranger, ordinary steps that led in minutes to devastation. It underscores the fragility of human safety. The beach was not inherently dangerous. The predator was. Yet the openness of the environment, combined with trust in its safety, gave him space to strike. For investigators and criminologists, timelines are not mere sequences of events, but psychological maps. Marianne and Christine's path traced innocence, trust, and the pursuit of freedom. The predator's path traced calculation, compulsion, and violent dominance. When these trajectories intersected, The result was inevitable, not fate, but choice. And yet the timeline remains incomplete. Every detail known is countered by a detail missing. Every footprint is balanced by a gap in evidence. Silence is the most enduring witness. The Wanda Beach murders remind us that predators do not thrive only in shadows. They thrive in the very spaces we consider safe, in daylight, in crowds, in places where the possibility of violence seems impossible. Ordinary hours concealed extraordinary horror. That truth, suspended in the dunes since 1965, is the most haunting timeline of all. The discovery of Marianne and Christine S. bodies shattered the illusion of safety that had defined Sydney S. summers. Beaches, once symbols of carefree freedom, now felt fragile. Police rushed to Wanda Beach, but the dunes resisted control. Wind shifted sand, footprints overlapped, and onlookers crowded the scene. From the start, evidence was both delicate and contaminated. Detectives tried to reconstruct events from body positions, footprints, and knife wounds, yet each observation generated more questions. The killer's movements could not be mapped with certainty. The scene was too exposed, too disturbed. Clues dissolved into speculation. Attention turned to witnesses. Police interviewed train passengers, beachgoers, and locals. Some described a blonde young man with the girls, others noticed nothing, while a few recalled strange behavior near the dunes. Accounts clashed, and memory, distorted by stress, became a fractured mirror. Meanwhile, public reaction surged. Newspapers blared sensational headlines, radio shows speculated, and the case escalated into one of Australia's most publicised murders. Fear spread quickly. Parents warned children to stay close. Beaches, once playgrounds, were recast as landscapes of danger. Journalists fueled anxiety further, amplifying theories of strangers, acquaintances, even family ties. Speculation magnified fear until it became psychological contagion, spreading suspicion through entire communities. The public demanded answers, but every new theory widened the void. Police, under immense pressure, searched tirelessly. Known offenders were questioned, suspects interviewed, prior assaults reviewed. Yet nothing led to resolution. The files grew thicker, but clarity slipped away. Every suspect seemed possible. None could be proven. For the families, the lack of closure was devastating. Marianne's siblings carried lifelong trauma. Her mother was consumed by guilt for granting her daughter freedom. Christine's already fractured family was forced to grieve under the glare of public scrutiny. Private pain became a spectacle. Investigators also sought guidance through psychological profiling. They examined patterns of predatory behavior, sexual assault, and violence against women. Yet profiles offered sketches, not identities. They outlined tendencies but no names, possibilities without proof. Theories multiplied, but none could withstand the test of evidence. In retrospect, critical errors were made. Some evidence was ignored or inadequately preserved. Reports of strange men in the area were dismissed. Potential suspects were questioned briefly and released. Evidence ignored became a refrain among later analysts. The investigation, though intense, lacked the forensic precision that modern cases demand. Still, the case did not fade quickly. It became a national obsession. Decades later, the phrase Wanda Beach murders still carried weight. It became shorthand for innocence lost, for failure of resolution, for the persistence of shadows in broad daylight. The cultural memory of the crime outlived the facts themselves. Within weeks of the murders, police released a sketch of the suspected man last seen with the girls. The sketch showed a youthful face, angular features, fair hair. Yet sketches are vulnerable to distortion. Eyewitnesses disagreed on details. No arrest followed. The sketch became an artifact of uncertainty rather than clarity. Meanwhile, rumors spread. Some believed the killer was a local, someone who knew the girls or their families. Others were convinced he was a stranger passing through. Theories multiplied without end. In small towns, suspicion has a way of growing like mold in silence, feeding on gaps where truth is absent. Media coverage intensified these suspicions. Tabloids dramatized every possible lead, sometimes inventing details for effect. Responsible journalism was drowned out by sensationalism. The media frenzy not only informed but also distorted. Public fear became public entertainment. The murders shifted from tragedy to narrative, consumed by readers with fascination and horror intertwined. The police, pressured by this atmosphere, pursued theories that mirrored public obsession. Some detectives focused on known sex offenders in Sydney. Others investigated possible German connections due to Marianne's immigrant background. Theories diverged and overlapped, but without hard evidence, each investigation ended in frustration. The case remained suspended in ambiguity. Years passed, and new suspects emerged. A notorious serial killer, Derek Percy, later became a person of interest. He was active in similar crimes and fit certain psychological patterns, yet definitive evidence linking him to Wanda Beach was absent. Percy remained a spectre in the file, plausible, terrifying, unproven. Public reaction evolved into cultural mythology. The murders were no longer just a police case, but a ghost story whispered through generations. Parents invoked it as cautionary tale. Teenagers told it in hushed tones around fires. The Wanda Beach murders became less about facts and more about the chilling reminder that safety is fragile. From a psychological perspective, the investigation itself reflects human limits. Detectives sought certainty where uncertainty ruled. Journalists sought narrative where silence prevailed. Communities sought closure where only absence existed. Each response reveals not just facts but psychology, our discomfort with ambiguity, our need to create meaning even when truth escapes. Police theories ranged from simple predation to complex conspiracies. Some believed the girls were targeted randomly by a passing killer. Others suspected personal knowledge, a betrayal hidden in plain sight. Each theory carried psychological projections. Randomness threatened everyone. Betrayal narrowed suspicion. Theories reflected not just possibility, but communal fear. Even today, experts debate the investigation's failures. Was it incompetence or simply the limits of the time? Did evidence ignored cost resolution, or was resolution always impossible given the conditions? The answer lies somewhere between. Forensics were primitive, but human error also magnified the loss of clarity. Both science and humanity failed. Public reaction to the Wanda Beach murders reshaped Sydney's sense of safety. Fear spread through suburbs as parents restricted children and communities imposed stricter rules. The violence extended far beyond Marianne and Christine, altering society's perception of freedom and risk. Over time, the investigation became less about solving the crime than living with its shadow. Police failed to bring closure, the media fueled speculation without truth, and grieving families endured public scrutiny while unable to reclaim their loss. The case entered cultural memory as both tragedy and identity. It endures because of silence, evidence lost, memories distorted, answers absent. This unresolved emptiness ensures the Wanda Beach murders remain one of Australia's darkest and most haunting cold cases. The Wanda Beach murders resist resolution, but they invite analysis. Without a name for the killer, psychology offers the closest approximation of truth. The crime scene, the timeline, and the silence left behind form a portrait of mind and motive. Understanding that portrait means stepping into the darkness that shaped both predator and prey. The wounds inflicted on Marianne and Christine speak beyond physical harm. They reveal the psychology of rage. Multiple stab injuries suggest not a swift act of killing, but an eruption of fury. Marianne's slashed throat appears symbolic, an attempt to silence her voice, a gesture of domination. Christine's repeated wounds reflect frenzy, violence spiraling out of control, mixed with sadistic gratification. This was not instrumental violence. It was expressive, with the victims' bodies turned into canvases for the killer's inner turmoil. Psychologically, such brutality aligns with the killer's mindset, a blend of compulsion, resentment, and distorted desire. Offenders like this rarely operate with meticulous planning. Instead, they seize vulnerable opportunities, channeling chaos within onto helpless targets. Trauma psychology suggests such violence often mirrors a perpetrator's own damage. If the killer was indeed young, as some witnesses believed, he may have carried histories of neglect, abuse, or alienation. In this framework, violence becomes both reenactment and reversal. a desperate attempt at control rooted not in material motives, but in the fleeting illusion of power. The after-effects ripple outward. Marianne and Christine's families carried lifelong trauma. Survivors of homicide victims often live within complicated grief, where loss is intensified by ambiguity. No arrest, no trial, no confession, only silence. For the Schmidt and Sharrock families, mourning became endless repetition of unanswered questions, a wound reopened by each new theory. On a societal level, the murders disrupted collective trust. Beaches, once symbols of Australian identity, carried an undercurrent of danger. The case reshaped cultural psychology. Innocence was no longer assumed in public spaces. The predator had revealed himself not through identity, but through possibility. Fear became diffuse, haunting every unguarded moment. Philosophy offers deeper insight. In Stoicism, suffering stems not from external events, but from judgment about them. Yet how can one discipline judgment when children are murdered without reason? For the families, the event was not controllable, but their suffering was compounded by endless speculation. Silence itself became a tormenting judge. Buddhist psychology interprets suffering as rooted in impermanence and attachment. The family's attachment to certainty, to answers, to closure, made the absence unbearable. The killer exploited impermanence. In one afternoon, laughter turned into silence. The Dharma teaches that life is transient, yet the unnaturalness of violence makes acceptance nearly impossible. Confucian thought emphasizes harmony within family and community. The Wanda Beach murders fractured both. Families were left incomplete, and communities were infected by suspicion. The killer's act disrupted not only two lives, but also the moral order. In Confucian terms, such disruption is not only crime but chaos, destabilizing the rituals of trust. From a forensic psychological view, the killer may have been someone with familiarity with the environment. He led the girls toward dunes rather than acting in plain sight, suggesting awareness of isolation points. This supports the hypothesis that he had stalked others before, rehearsing the crime mentally, waiting for a moment to actualize impulse. If the killer was Derek Percy, as some suspect, the psychological fit is chilling. Percy exhibited compulsions toward young victims, sexual sadism, and an ability to mask violence behind normalcy. Yet without proof, this remains theory. Still, analyzing Percy's pathology reveals what type of person could commit such a crime. Obsessive, compulsive, detached from empathy. The absence of resolution allows projection. Each analyst, each journalist, each citizen projects their own fears into the void. Perhaps that is why the case persists so powerfully. It is a mirror of collective anxiety. We see in the silence not only the killer's shadow, but also our own fear of randomness and vulnerability. Psychologically, the murders show how violence disrupts time. For Marianne and Christine, time stopped on the dunes. For their families, time fractured into before and after. For investigators, time became a cycle of reopening and disappointment. For society, the event froze an image of innocence destroyed. Trauma is not just pain, it is temporal dislocation. Could modern investigation offer more? DNA technology has advanced. Partial samples remain, though degraded. Familial searching, advanced profiling, and digital forensics may one day narrow the void. Yet even science cannot erase the decades of contamination, the erosion of memory, the passage of witnesses. New tools may whisper answers, but certainty remains elusive. What remains most haunting is the silence of motive. When killers confess, they provide fragments of understanding, however disturbing. Here no confession exists. Silence expands, and into that silence we pour theories. Yet perhaps the truest answer lies in that very absence. Some acts are not understandable because they are born from disintegration, not reason. To reflect philosophically again, fear is a mirror. When we look into the Wanda Beach murders, we confront not only a killer but ourselves. We see our fragility, our illusion of safety, our desperation for closure. We recognize that life is fragile not because of nature, but because of human choice distorted into violence. The aftermath continues even decades later. Families still speak of loss, investigators still carry regret, Citizens still recall headlines. The beach itself, though filled with new generations of laughter, holds an invisible scar. Each wave that erases footprints also erases certainty, reminding us that memory, like sand, is endlessly unstable. If there is a path forward, it lies not only in science, but also in listening to silence. Trauma psychology teaches that healing requires acknowledgement, even without resolution. For the families, perhaps acknowledgement of uncertainty itself is the only form of closure possible. Accepting ambiguity may be the final act of survival. The Wanda Beach murders teach us about the limits of human control, the fragility of safety, and the depths of unresolved grief. They remind us that violence is not always rational, that evil can be ordinary, and that silence can be more oppressive than screams. In the end, perhaps the silence is the message.
If fear is a mirror, what do we truly see in the Wanda Beach murders? We see innocence shattered, safety questioned, and silence deepened into something almost unbearable. Decades have passed, yet the mystery endures, whispering that some truths remain hidden, not by distance, but by the shadows within human nature itself. The Wanda Beach murders remind us that safety is fragile, that memory is fallible, and that closure is not guaranteed. A quiet stretch of coast can hold a scream that never fades. Each wave that reaches the shore carries not only salt and sand, but also an unanswered question: who killed Mary Ann and Christine, and why? If this story has moved you, I invite you to like, share the video, and subscribe for more episodes where we search the human mind, not just the crime scene. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession. Thank you for listening to Criminal Mindcast. References: 1. Sydney Morning Herald Archives, 1965. The Wanda Beach Murders, Sydney Morning Herald. 2. Kennedy, L. 2005. True Crime, Australian Murders Unsolved. Allen and Unwin. 3. Bifford, J. 2010. Cold Case Files, Australia's Darkest Mysteries. HarperCollins.